The D-Wade carried argument would haunt his GOAT case forever. This is actually a take that I have said before, so I'm gonna like it because I'm arrogant. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Buckets. If you're over on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and hit that like button as we're trying to hit 200K subscribers by the end of the year. Also, go ahead and check us out over on Spotify if you want to enjoy this as an audio-only experience. We are back with hot takes. By the way, we're going to be doing hot takes 2 times a week going forward because you guys love these videos, they perform the best. It feels a little bit cheap to put them out so much, but I did it in the past and no one complained about it. So if y'all are good with it, we're just gonna keep reacting to your hot takes. From Curb Stomp, Jokic is a more talented player than Magic Johnson, and the only reason he won't make it in the top 5 is because the league is too competitive now for anyone to put together a resume that good. Yeah, that's something that I am pondering about the modern NBA as we're finding it harder and harder and harder to get repeat champions, that there might just not be, you know, players racking up 4, 5, 6 NBA championships. You know, I think the fact that Steph and the Warriors ultimately ended up getting 4 is kind of an indicator of the direction that they're going. As for Jokic being a more talented player than Magic Johnson, I think Magic's playmaking is in a stratosphere that no other player will ever touch. And that is something that, while Jokic is probably a top 5 playmaker of all time, Magic Johnson's number 1, and I think there's a huge gap between number 1 and number 2. That's me personally. There are not as many people who feel that strongly. There's people who would call LeBron the best playmaker ever. But Magic Johnson, to me, he is the pinnacle of the idea of what playmaking is. And the reason for that is that he is a complete statistical outlier as it relates to assists. A fact that I mentioned routinely on this channel is that there has not been a player who has averaged double-digit assists in a playoff run where that run ended in a championship, except for 2 players, LeBron in 2020 and Magic Johnson 5 times. Playmaking-wise, a whole nother level of outlier. Scoring-wise, Jokic is a way better scorer. And I think functionally, because he plays the center position and he does it well enough with his hands, while he's not a shot blocker, he has good at getting into the passing lanes. I do think that he's ultimately a more impactful defender, better rebounder. So I don't hate this argument. I get where you're coming from. Magic still gets the legacy and the seniority points, but if you said by the end of Jokic's career that you would take him over Magic, I don't think there's too many people who would look at you sideways about that, other than stubborn old NBA fans who find it impossible to consider any modern player as good as the older ones. So yeah, I like that take. I don't agree yet. I kind of agree. I kind of don't. I'm not sure. I'm a little in between on that one. This take from Gabagool, I want to react to because it's actually in response to my take from the last Hot Takes video about the Most Improved Player award. The award is not Most Unexpectedly Improved Player, it's just Most Improved Player. I understand where you're coming from there. You're not wrong about that. However, just what the name of the award is not strictly what the award ends up being. There's a general precedent from the history of the award, and that general precedent says the second-year players win it very rarely. And anytime it is a second-year player that wins it, more often than not, it is a player who is a huge surprise. Like Gilbert Arenas won it in his 2nd season, and no one expected him to even be in that kind of conversation, to be nearly as good as he ended up being. Historically, it is the most unexpected improved player, and I feel like Victor Wembanyama would not fall into that category. I understand what you're saying, but I think you're being a little pedantic, if I'm using that word correctly. I might not be. I sometimes just say words thinking that I know what they mean, and I'm not that sure. But yeah, not a bad take. It's decent enough. From Truman69, nice. LaMelo Ball, assuming he's healthy and plays a couple upcoming seasons, will be remembered as a John Wall type of player who had some good seasons and fun highlights, but both of their careers would be cut short due to injuries. I hope this does not end up being true. I also don't know that LaMelo will be able to peak as high as John Wall, because while LaMelo can score and pass just as well as John Wall, in fact, I would argue there's a chance he could be a better scorer than John Wall, especially with his jump shot. He's not ever going to be anywhere near the defender that John Wall was, but where your general sentiment as like a point guard that will not so much be remembered other than by people who were actually there because their career was ruined by injuries, yeah, I can see that. From NHC7772, If the Celtics go back to the finals and Jaylen Brown shows everyone again that he's a very good defender and keeps his scoring up, Rusty will finally say something good about Jaylen Brown. I hate how I have to be positioned against Jaylen Brown just because I simply disagree with what a lot of people assess him to be. I don't have any beef with Jaylen Brown. I'm very far from thinking he's a bad player, but when people start saying he's just as good as Jason Tatum when my own two eyes see that that's very clearly not the case, well, then I start to have beef with it. But Jaylen Brown is probably a top 20 NBA player. That's really good. He's just not a superstar to me. That was a huge point of contention in the most recent main channel video, if you want to check that out, about the rise and fall of super teams. A lot of people were arguing against me, thinking that Jaylen just isn't a superstar. I think I have a more strict definition of what that is. I don't even think there are 10 superstars in the NBA right now. But, you know, some people think Jaylen is in a top 10 conversation. And when I hear that, I feel like I'm an insane person. And unfortunately, that means that I have to say more negative things about him than I have to ultimately end up saying positive. This is another reaction to a previous take from Skaga. It's just a bunch of H's. 100% some fans and analysts can be better GMs than some current GMs. I think a couple of analysts who are former GMs could be better than current GMs, but that's about it. I think that this is hubris to the highest degree from NBA fans to think because they can recognize player value that it ultimately means that they can do the job. There's so many aspects of doing the GM job that goes beyond talent evaluation and allocation and all that. Like, that shit is way more complicated than NBA 2K makes you feel like it is. And I would wager, sure, maybe a fan here or there who's just ultra smart could do it, but like me, other NBA YouTubers, whoever you like on NBA Twitter, almost all of them, no fucking shot they can do better than some current GMs. I feel like this is a talent thing, not on the same level of the difference between a good basketball player at the Y and an NBA player, but like a bad GM is better at his job than I would be, generally speaking. And also, you're looking at a lot of moves with hindsight when you give that criticism to them, and a lot of people would walk into the same damn mistakes, especially a less trained and professional person. From Lemise, who I think LeBron playing badly in the 2011 finals helped his legacy. If LeBron played slightly better and Miami ended up winning, with Wade being the finals MVP, LeBron wouldn't have the claim to be the best player on all the championships he won, which would forever cast him below Jordan, who has 6 finals MVPs and 6 rings. The D-Wade carried argument would haunt his GOAT case forever. This is actually a take that I have said before, so I'm gonna like it because I'm arrogant. But overall, I don't agree, but I understand where you're coming from. As I was saying it, when I did say it, for however long ago that did happen, was that he ultimately would be better off with a championship than not. Like, 5 rings is better than 4, no matter how you spin it. But there would definitely be a lot of people who gave him shit for being the second best player on a championship team. But I think ultimately being the second best player on a championship team is a lot better than just losing, and losing in a fashion that was extremely embarrassing and awful, because it's not as though 2011 isn't held over his head anyways, so it might as well be held over his head when he has a title along with it. But I get your point, and it would be interesting how different the narratives would be. From Earl Jones Longbottom, Donavan Mitchell is second to only Luka Doncic when it comes to being the league's best on-ball shot creator. Unlike players like Jokic or Trey, there is no holes in his game with the ball in his hands. He can drive to the rim at will, can pull up from the mid-range, has the 3-ball, the step back, and is one of the most underrated passers and playmakers in the league, and was decimating the Celtics before he went down with injury. Not saying he's better than Jokic. Well, if he's better at on-ball shot creation, and that's essentially what Jokic is best at. I mean, I guess Jokic does a lot of off-ball stuff with his scoring as well. I don't know. If you're just saying ball handler, I would probably agree with this statement. I think that Donovan Mitchell, as a three-point shooter, off of the dribble three-point shooter, does not get enough credit because he is truly one of the best shooters in the entire NBA. And I feel like that routinely is not mentioned when talking about how damn good he is. However, I don't think he's better than Jokic, that's for sure, which is not what you're saying, but Jokic is definitely a better creator than Donovan Mitchell. But in terms of just a player who has the ball in their hands a lot, I agree. I also agree about him being an underrated playmaker. I really didn't think he would be much of a good playmaker in the NBA based off the first couple of seasons, but he was also spending a lot of times. Earlier on, it was Ricky Rubio, and then later it was Mike Conley with, another playmaking guard out there. So that factor probably held him back. And last year, after Darius Garland went down and he ended up being the lead ball handler 24/7, the playmaking really showed itself to be a lot more of an asset to him than a liability. From ideally 3-1-8-3, with all due respect to Charles Barkley and all due disrespect to Karl Malone, Chris Paul is the greatest ringless player of all time. I, off of the top of my head, would agree with you on that. I think Chris Paul is pretty damn underrated to begin with. I routinely see people in NBA discourse like completely leaving Chris out of conversations and point guard conversations. I see people putting him like, who would you take, start, bench, cut, and like a prime Chris Paul is on there, and so many people cut prime Chris Paul, and I'm like, what are we doing here? I remember I saw one that was MVP Derrick Rose, MVP Russell Westbrook, and 2009 Chris Paul. Even though he didn't win the MVP and those two did, I'm very confident 2009 Chris Paul is a better player than both of them. All around, maybe the most all around point guard, and if we're going like a height limitation, the pound for pound argument that Allen Iverson gets, in terms of a player who is like 6'1" or shorter, I think Chris Paul is the most talented player of that height ever. I don't think anyone was better. Chris Paul was one of the best defensive guards of all time, despite his size limitations, one of the best playmakers, while also being a much better scorer than a lot of his contemporaries who were primarily known for their playmaking. Carmelo Anthony is not better than Jason Tatum at literally any aspect of basketball. I would be interested to see the mid-range percentages. The differences there are probably in favor of Carmelo Anthony, but after that, I don't know if there is a single thing. Playmaking, he definitely has the edge. Defense, he definitely has the edge. Rebounding is probably around the same, but it doesn't really matter that much. So yeah, for the most part, I agree with this take from Bunter. From Andrew Buzz, Luka is currently the best offensive player in the league. I am going to disagree with that. And my reason for that is simply this. I think that Luka and Nikola Jokic are more or less the same type of basketball player, except one of them is a center and one of them is a guard, which means one of them is dribbling all the time and one of them isn't. Luka has a limitation to his offense, which is that he does too much and he's a little bit too predictable because he always has the ball in his hands. It also wears him down and he's tired by the end of the game, and he ends up being less effective in fourth quarters, especially when he has to really carry the offense. Something that I was concerned about with the Mavericks going into these playoffs was Luka's usage. He was like 20-something all-time in usage this year. Meanwhile, Nikola Jokic just makes super quick decisions with the ball. The ball is in other people's hands all the time, and the offense is still based around him. The system is entirely based around him, but it's not like he is the system, if that makes sense. Like that distinction is probably not easy to explain, but ultimately what I'm getting at, that limitation of overusage isn't applicable to Jokic, so Jokic is the better offensive player to me. It's a slight margin though, it's very close, and they're both fucking ridiculous offensive players. Luka is definitely second. From Kenneth Godwin, in 20 years, Kareem is gonna be forgotten about due to LeBron beating his longevity argument, and Wemby will be in the exact same spot that LeBron was in, where we all know he's incredibly talented. However, he won't get the amount of championships that MJ has and will lessen his future GOAT argument. Okay, it seems like you're kind of contradicting your point there, but I do ultimately agree. I think I even made a video about this, that Kareem's only real argument for being the GOAT at this stage would be the longevity, but LeBron is beating that longevity. Low-key, hate to say this, but I do think that Kareem can be a little bit overrated due to that longevity, because if you actually look past his first 5 seasons, he starts to become a much less dominant player and just, you know, another top player in the league. He started off really, really crazy, but in terms of a long peak, doesn't compare to LeBron and Mike, but he was around for a very long time, which is why he got so many damn points. But LeBron has passed him, and he's been way better at these years of his career than Kareem was at these years of his career. Like, by year 20, Kareem was essentially a borderline role player. LeBron is still a top 10 player in the NBA. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to be forgotten about, but I do think that his GOAT case will be almost non-existent, and you will very rarely hear people argue that, especially because 20 years from now, as morbid as this is, people who think Kareem's the GOAT probably won't be around anymore. So, yeah, you're right. From NBA Backcourt Media, hot take. Although it looks crazy that Kobe and Shaq don't have more MVPs due to the caliber of player they were, when you look back at who actually won / the candidates for those years, it makes sense. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. There's really not many years where these guys actually should. In fact, I don't think there's a single year where either of these players should have won the MVP and they didn't. I'm a huge Kobe fan. I like Shaq the player, don't like Shaq the person. But when you look through their careers, like, I very strongly disagree with the argument that 05-06 Kobe or 06-07, whichever one it was, I don't think that version of him deserved to win MVP, because I do not believe in this player is carrying the team and their stats are ridiculous, so let's give them the award take. I didn't want Russ to win the 2017 MVP for that reason. I would have personally picked James Harden, but obviously that's not how it went. But normally, that is how it goes. The award goes to one of the best player on one of the most talented teams in the league. And Steve Nash got 2 of them that a lot of people think should have gone to Shaq in 05 and Kobe in 06. I disagree, although I also, this is my take specifically, I don't even think that Steve Nash should have won those MVPs. I think that Dirk should have won both of those MVPs and three-peated. However, he, had his problems in the playoffs that were pretty embarrassing for him. Actually, that was after the fact. So, yeah, if you look at his stats and how good the Mavericks were, to me, it's actually kind of ridiculous that Dirk didn't win the award. But yeah, moving on. Overall, I agree. Kobe and Shaq shouldn't have more MVPs. There wasn't a season where they should have gotten it. From Bucks in 6 always, there is no argument for Kobe Bryant being higher all time than Tim Duncan. That's an interesting one. I definitely don't think there's no argument. Kobe was a much better scorer. Like, I think the fact that Tim Duncan and Kobe had essentially the same efficiency, despite the fact that Kobe shot the ball significantly more, is noteworthy. Kobe is a great defender, but he's not, in my opinion, a top 2 defender of all time like Tim Duncan is, so Tim obviously has that edge. Kobe, I think, ends up being an underrated playmaker because he was kind of an unwilling one at times, but whenever he did actually like to pass the ball, it went much more in favor of the offense. Tim Duncan, very good playmaker though for a big man and more of a team player in general. Obviously won more championships. Tim Duncan was the best player on more of those championships, as I believe he has 3 finals MVPs, 99, 03, and 05. And then Tony Parker in 2007, Kawhi in 2014. Tim probably had the better overall help consistently. Like, the consistency of his help throughout his career was probably a little bit better, but he also had that lull period and he still managed to win the championship in 2003 despite that, and got through Kobe and Shaq in the process. I do think that Tim is higher all time than Kobe. However, I'm not going to say no argument. Like, for a lot of people, and understandably so, the game's about buckets, and Kobe was much more of a bucket than Tim was. Overall basketball ability though, and resume wise, yeah, Tim Duncan probably is higher all time than Kobe. He is for me personally. From Jake Kavanaugh, I'm not sure. Nikola Jovic has the potential to be the #1 option on a title winning team. Are you like related to him or something? How the fuck could you possibly come to that conclusion? That's insane. I do think he can be a very good role player and a good starter. Best #1 option on a title winning team. Any player who can be that is probably going to display that ability to some level in their first couple of years in the NBA. Obviously, Jovic has had some limited opportunity, but not to that extent, man. That's wild. From Fire Shadow Blade 9. Cool, man. Hot take, the Lakers have never been good at player development. Every legend they've drafted was already at an exceptional level when they got them. Elgin, Jerry, Magic, Worthy, and Kobe. All of them had the individual mindset to get better and define their generations. I don't expect Dalton Connect or Bronny to become exceptional due to the player development coaches there when Bron retires. You could say I'm biased though as a Knicks fan who naturally hates the Lakers. Yeah, I don't care about that. You're not wrong. I do think that the difference between the Celtics and the Lakers is like the Lakers have been a free agency / trade way of building roster philosophy, and the Celtics have had a build through the draft type of like way of approaching things. Like if you look at, they got Magic Johnson through trading for a draft pick. It wasn't their own pick. Obviously they did draft him, but you know what I mean. They got him through a trade. They got Kobe through trading for a draft pick. They got Shaq through free agency. They got LeBron through free agency. That's kind of their approach. They got Kareem through a trade. Meanwhile, the Boston Celtics, if you think of the Celtics teams of the 60s, the one in the 70s, the 80s Celtics with Bird, McHale, and what's his name? Robert Parrish. Technically, Robert Parrish was drafted by the Warriors. My mistake. Either way, in general, the philosophy from the Lakers seems to be less about homegrown talent and more about getting that talent to LA when it is discovered, because LA is an attractive destination. So I mostly agree. I don't think that never good is fair, and I also think that it's not as though a franchise is just cursed to forever be bad at player development. It depends on what personnel is in the building. I just think the philosophy of the franchise has always been, we're going to get talent here, and we're not so much going to worry about developing it ourselves. They spent a couple of years doing that when they had the Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, Lonzo Ball core, but no, that's not really the way that they do things. From the gaming guitarist, hot take, Austin Reaves will become a superstar after LeBron retires. He and AD will become a dynamic duo and will lead the Lakers to another championship. Gonna have to disagree with you on this one. No, there's no way. Again, if a player is going to display superstar / best player on a championship team, ability, they're going to do that earlier on in their career, especially given the opportunity. And Austin Reaves has had opportunity. He's been a starter for 2 years now. So no fucking way. I do think there is a realm where he ends up being an all-star because he's a very good shooter and he's a talented on-ball creator, decent at getting to the free throw line. Yeah, this is just, there's just no fucking way. From Marcel6445, Ben Simmons is the next Aaron Gordon lottery player who will help take a contender to the next level in a much lesser role. The difference will be that Ben Simmons will likely get paid less relative than what Aaron Gordon got paid, but I think a healthy Ben Simmons will help a fringe contender for the 2026 season. Man, I don't know what the fuck to say about Ben Simmons at this point. It's kind of hard to make. I can see it. I see what your vision is. Like, it's the athletic forward who's a really strong defender and a capable playmaker and ball handler, can get to the basket really well, even if he's not always a fan of doing it. But I think Aaron Gordon's issues as a three-point shooter still ultimately have him as a better spacer than Ben Simmons, who is literally just a complete zero in that area. So I'm going to go with no. I don't even know if Ben Simmons will be on a contract by the time his one with the Nets expires. From ZRJ19, hot take, OKC matches up better with the Celtics than anybody else, and if they go to the finals with the Celtics, very good chance they would beat them. They have better depth. The starting fives are almost evenly matched, and Shea is one of the best players for either team. And Shea is the best player for either team. I agree with this. I am going to make a video talking about it, but OKC is actually my title favorite next year. I think that I'm going to just pick a different team each year until a repeat title does happen, because I just don't think that's going to happen. And you're right, OKC does match up really well. They have the depth. I do think they have the better player. They probably don't have the better second player. I don't think Chet or J-Dub will be better than Jaylen Brown by next season, but they might have the better third best player and so on. I do think that OKC probably has the best chance to beat the Celtics. Out of the West, they're probably the best team in the West to me, and I do agree about them matching up really well. From Alpha Brother 6823, scorching hot take. LeBron's Game 7 block was irrelevant because Iggy was going to miss the layup anyways. I don't think that's true. I'm pretty confident he was going to finish that layup, but that is very funny. From Someboy2210, it's hypocritical for people to try and discredit the Russell Celtics rings because of the era and quality of competition, but if people are going to discredit the Celtics, then they need to keep that same logic for the first 5 of the Lakers rings, which were when black people were either not even in the league yet, or there were entire teams without a single black player. I believe the Minneapolis Lakers were one of those teams. Yeah, the thing that I always say is I don't recognize segregation basketball. If you played when literally people weren't allowed to play because of their skin color, your championships are irrelevant, okay? They mean nothing to me. And yeah, I'm more critical of those championships towards LA's legacy than I am Boston's championships. At least they had that going for them. I feel like a lot of people just don't even fucking know that, like, about the fact that the Minneapolis Lakers are representing 5 of their championships. But yeah, you're 100% right. All right, this is gonna be our last one. From Star Wars News and Memes. Most of the terrible takes from NBA media personalities are purposeful. Good takes, unless they're once in a lifetime brilliant, don't generate any buzz. Terrible takes, on the other hand, generate word of mouth, clicks, eyeballs, and engagement, and therefore dollars. It's not these people's job to make good takes or insights into the game. It's their job to generate attention, and therefore calling the media personalities idiots for terrible takes are making the mistake of looking at the NBA, ESPN, etc. as organizations that somehow owe the public basketball knowledge and insight, and forget the goals are privately owned for-profit companies. The only way this will change is if the public largely ignores terrible takes and only engages with well thought out ideas. I mostly agree with what you're saying. I think the reason people call these personalities idiots isn't even necessarily because, you know, the takes are bad or whatever. Sometimes though, it feels like they're saying that shit in earnest. It depends on the one. There's a lot of them where it really feels like they're reaching for attention, like when fucking Max Kellerman said, "I want Iguodala." In general, though, I feel like most people recognize this at this point, and there's a reason that these companies are not doing as well as they used to. The way that these shows are performing has not been as good as in years past. And I feel like I don't see like a Stephen A. Smith ridiculous take as frequently anymore. And I feel like people have come to realize that. But I do think that the NBA itself does owe the public basketball knowledge and insight. I think if they want their league to perform well, talking about the sport well will do better. While yes, people pay more attention to a hot take, it's bad attention. Bad attention is still attention, but I don't think that means that good attention is impossible. I think that's just the way that things have gone, and no one wants to break that cycle. But in reality, there is plenty of people who make good takes out there, and you can go find them. And there's plenty of people who find success by putting good takes out there. Unfortunately, it just takes national media time to catch up to that. I do think we are heading in that direction, though. I do feel good about that. But yeah, that is it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video. Actually, Rudy is editing this video, so shout out to him for editing this one. But that is it. Goodbye.